Ryan had never seen a place so bright, so polished, and so silent at the same time. The palace of the Scifi Empire stood like a mountain of crystal and metal, its tall walls catching the light of two suns above the alien world. He walked carefully behind the guards, their silver armor shining, their steps sharp and cold. Every sound he made seemed to echo. He was the only human inside the hall, and every alien eye watched him with quiet judgment. His mission was clear. He was an emissary, chosen to represent humanity in the first direct meeting with the Scifi royal family. Ryan had been trained in diplomacy, history, and language, but nothing had prepared him for the heavy pressure of this moment. Humanity was still new to the great community of the stars. Most civilizations had lived among each other for centuries, but humans were only beginning to step into this wide galaxy. One wrong step could close doors forever. At the end of the hall, a tall figure waited. She was unlike the guards. Her form was slender but strong. Her robes layered with shining fabric that flowed like water. Her skin shimmered faintly, catching the colors of the suns, and her eyes glowed with a steady light of silver blue. She was Princess Elira, heir of the Scifi Empire, respected and feared across 1,000 systems. When Ryan reached the bottom of the stairs, he bowed his head politely, as he had been taught. He could feel her gaze on him, steady and unreadable. For a moment he wondered if she could sense the speed of his heartbeat. The chamber was filled with nobles and advisors. They whispered quietly, watching every move. The Scifi were famous for their strict traditions. They valued order, control, and silence. To them, humans were strange and unpredictable, often too bold for their own safety. Ryan knew he had to be careful, yet he also believed that honesty and warmth were part of human strength. Elira raised one graceful hand. Her voice carried like music, though her words were formal and heavy. "Human emissary, you stand before the Scifi Empire. Speak carefully, for your words will be remembered." Ryan lifted his head and forced himself to meet her eyes. "I come with respect, Princess Elira. Humanity seeks friendship, not conflict. We offer knowledge, cooperation, and loyalty where it is earned." His words were steady, but he wanted to show something more than cold diplomacy. He wanted to show sincerity. Humans had always believed that connection came from more than words, and so, following his instinct, he did something no one had warned him against. He reached out gently and touched her arm. A light contact, the kind of gesture humans often used as a sign of trust and openness. The reaction was instant. A wave of gasps moved through the hall. The guards shifted their weapons with sharp sounds of metal. The nobles whispered louder, some with shock, some with anger. Elira froze. For one long breath, she said nothing. Her glowing eyes locked on the place where his hand had rested. The hall grew so quiet that even the air seemed afraid to move. Then she stepped back, her face calm but her voice sharp enough to cut. "Touch me once more, human," she warned, her tone clear enough to silence the nobles, "and you will learn the price." Ryan pulled his hand back at once. His stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished under him. He had not meant to insult her. He had only wanted to show a simple human sign of honesty, but now he realized he might have broken a sacred rule. He bowed low, his voice careful. "Forgive me, Princess. Where I come from, such a touch is a greeting of trust, nothing more. I meant no disrespect." Elira studied him with a gaze that felt both cold and curious. She did not answer right away. Her people stared at her, waiting to see how she would react. Slowly, she turned and walked back to her seat at the high throne. Only then did she speak again, her tone softer but still strong. "Your customs are not ours. Here, such contact is sacred. It carries meaning you cannot yet understand. If you wish to walk among the Scifi, you must learn restraint." Ryan nodded, his face calm though his thoughts were racing. He had wanted to make a good beginning, but instead he had started with a mistake. Still, there was something strange in the way she looked at him as she spoke. It was not pure anger. It was something quieter, a kind of unsettled curiosity. As the court moved on to formal words and questions, Ryan answered carefully, sticking to the lessons he had memorized. But his mind kept returning to that moment of contact. He wondered what exactly it meant in Scifi culture, and why Elira's voice, though filled with warning, carried an edge of hesitation. He also wondered why he felt the warmth of her skin still lingering against his palm, long after the touch had ended. The first meeting between human and princess was far from perfect, but in that single moment something had shifted. Neither of them fully understood it yet, but both knew that this encounter was only the beginning of a path neither had expected to walk. The great hall emptied slowly after the first meeting, but whispers still lingered in the air like smoke. The Sarathi nobles left in groups, their tall figures wrapped in heavy robes, their voices sharp and quick as they spoke in their own tongue. Their words were not meant for Ryan, but he could tell from the glances they gave him that they doubted his worth. A human had dared to touch their princess. To them it was more than rude. It was almost unthinkable. Ryan walked down a quiet corridor behind one of the palace guides. The walls were carved with patterns that looked like endless rivers and skies. Blue light glowed from the crystals above, filling the hall with calm brightness. Yet inside, Ryan felt no calm at all. He kept replaying the moment when he touched the princess. He could not tell if it had ruined everything or if it had opened some kind of strange door. The guide stopped at a chamber prepared for him. The room was wide, with soft floors and a large window that opened toward the city. From there, Ryan could see towers rising like silver spears and bridges crossing in graceful arcs. Alien ships moved through the sky in perfect order, their lights shining like stars. It was a world so advanced and elegant that it almost seemed untouchable. And yet, humanity stood at its gates hoping for a place within it. As he rested, Ryan thought about Elira's warning. "Touch me once more, human, and you will learn the price." Her words had been sharp, yet her eyes had not been filled with simple anger. He remembered how long she had paused before speaking, as if she herself was unsettled. He could not help wondering what touch truly meant to her people. To him it had been a simple gesture, but perhaps it carried the weight of bonds and promises among the Sarathi. The next day he was brought again before the court, this time for a formal banquet. The Sarathi nobles sat in long rows, their silver plates filled with food that shimmered faintly with strange colors. Bowls of liquid glowed softly as though the meals themselves held light. The air carried a cool fragrance unlike any spice Ryan had known. He was placed at the end of the main table, far from the princess, though he could see her clearly from where he sat. Elira sat straight and tall, her presence commanding the entire room without effort. Her robes today were of deep blue, lined with white threads that seemed to move like flowing water. She spoke little, only nodding at the words of her advisors. But every so often Ryan caught her eyes drifting toward him, steady and unreadable. The nobles around Ryan spoke carefully, asking about Earth and humanity. Some questions were polite, but others carried sharp edges. One asked if humans were still fighting among themselves. Another asked if humanity's technology was not borrowed from older civilizations. Each word was meant to remind him that humans were newcomers, still clumsy children in a galaxy of giants. Ryan answered calmly, though he did not hide the truth. Yes, humanity had faced many struggles. Yes, their ships were young compared to those of the Sarathi. But humans had a strength that was not measured only in weapons or long lifespans. They had endurance, hope, and the courage to rise after each fall. His words were plain, yet they carried a weight that silenced some of the whispers. Elira listened without interrupting. Her expression remained calm, but her eyes seemed to grow brighter when Ryan spoke with such honesty. The nobles often layered their words with hidden meanings, careful not to show too much. But this human spoke straight, even when the truth was not flattering. It was something the court was not used to. At one moment, a noble challenged him openly. "If humans are so strong in spirit, then why do you come here seeking alliance instead of standing on your own?" The question hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Ryan looked at the noble, then allowed his gaze to rise to the princess. His answer came with steady calm. Because strength is not only in standing alone. True strength is also in knowing when to reach out a hand, when to build trust, and when to walk together. The hall grew quiet again. Some nobles frowned while others lowered their eyes in thought. Elira herself leaned back slowly, her lips pressing together as if she was holding back words. When the banquet ended, Ryan was guided away. But just before he left the hall, Elira's voice stopped him. She spoke in front of the entire court, her tone smooth but sharp enough to carry meaning. "You speak boldly for a human. Do not mistake boldness for wisdom. The Sarathi have survived for ages not by touching freely but by guarding carefully." Ryan bowed his head respectfully. "I understand, princess. Yet sometimes even and a guarded heart can miss the light that lies in a simple gesture." Gasps rippled through the hall again, but Elira said nothing more. Her glowing eyes followed him as he left, and for a moment she seemed caught between warning and wonder. That night, as the city lights shimmered beyond his window, Ryan realized something important. The Sarathi were not only testing him with rules and silence, they were watching to see if humanity's spirit could break under pressure, and while he had nearly made a mistake with one touch, he also felt certain that his honesty had planted a question in the princess's mind, a question she could not easily ignore. The palace of the Sarathi was vast, filled with chambers and halls that seemed endless. For days, Rian was guided through ceremonies, introductions, and lessons in their customs. Each moment felt like walking on a narrow bridge above a deep fall. One wrong step could destroy all chances of alliance. The Sarathi nobles never stopped watching him. Their eyes were cold, their words careful, and their questions sharp. Yet in all these days, it was the princess whose presence weighed most heavily on him. Princess Elira remained distant, her words measured, her gaze steady. She spoke only when duty required it, and when she did, her tone carried authority that silenced even the boldest noble. But beneath that calm surface, Ryan sensed something unsettled. Whenever their eyes met, there was a flicker, something she tried to hide. On the fifth evening, Ryan wandered through a high corridor lined with crystal windows. From here, the city spread below, alive with light and motion. Ships glided like silver birds, their trails weaving through the skies. The air inside the palace was quiet, but beyond the windows, the world moved like a living sea. He thought about Earth, so small compared to this empire, and wondered if humanity truly belonged among these ancient powers. A soft sound of steps behind him pulled him from his thoughts. When he turned, he found Elira standing there alone. The guards remained far behind, leaving her space as if she had commanded it. She stood with calm grace, her robes flowing gently, her silver blue eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You walk the halls like one searching for something," she said. Rian bowed slightly. "Perhaps I am searching, princess. To understand your people, your ways, and maybe even what role humanity might have here." She studied him for a long moment. "Understanding is not so simple. You step into a world shaped by centuries of order. One careless act can shift how an entire people sees you. You already know this." Her words carried the weight of their first meeting. Ryan lowered his head. "I know. I did not mean to offend. On my world, touch is a bridge, a sign of honesty, but here it carries meaning I still cannot grasp." Elira's gaze softened just slightly. "Among my people, touch is not casual. It is a promise, a bond that cannot be broken without shame. To touch is to claim trust beyond words, and so it is not given freely. That is why your act shocked the court. They do not believe you understand what you ask for when you reach out your hand." Rian listened carefully. At last he spoke with quiet honesty. "Then perhaps my mistake was not in reaching out, but in not knowing how much weight it carried. If that is true, princess, then I can only say that I meant no harm. If anything, it was a clumsy attempt at trust." Elira turned her eyes toward the city lights. For a moment, her calm mask seemed to slip. "You are different, human. The nobles whisper that your people are reckless, too quick to leap where others walk slowly. But you stand here and speak as if you do not fear their judgment." "I fear it," Ryan admitted, "but fear has never stopped humans from moving forward. If it had, we would still be trapped on our own world, never reaching the stars." His words seemed to linger in the air. Elira said nothing, but the glow in her eyes grew stronger, as if lit by some inner thought she could not silence. Before more could be said, hurried steps echoed through the corridor. An advisor approached, bowing deeply before Elira. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Princess, forgive the interruption. There are whispers in the council chambers. Some speak of doubt. They question your decision to allow the humans so close." Elira's calm returned at once. Her voice was steady, her posture tall. "Let them whisper. The Sarathi have faced storms greater than words." But as the advisor left, Ryan caught the faintest shadow crossing her face. She did not show it to her court, but she knew her position was not unshaken. There were those who would use any excuse to weaken her, and his presence was becoming that excuse. Later that night, Ryan passed through another corridor when he heard voices from behind a closed door. He paused, listening quietly. Two nobles spoke in low tones, their words filled with suspicion. "The princess grows too curious," one said. "She entertains the human as if his presence matters. This is weakness." "Perhaps," the other replied, "but weakness can be turned into opportunity. If she loses favor, others may rise." Ryan's heart tightened. He had not wanted to interfere in Sarathi matters, but now he understood. There was more at risk than just diplomacy. Illyra herself was in danger, surrounded by those who would use his presence to bring her down. He stepped away silently, not wanting to be discovered. As he returned to his chamber, his mind wrestled with questions. Should he warn her? Or would that only make her see him as a meddler? He remembered her words. Touch me once more, human, and you will learn the price. Yet when she had nearly slipped on the stairs earlier that day, he had instinctively reached out to steady her. Their hands had brushed for only a second before she pulled away, her face unreadable. Even in that brief moment, he had felt something powerful, something more than tradition or taboo. And though she had withdrawn, her eyes had betrayed a spark of conflict she tried to hide. Rian lay awake long into the night, knowing the path ahead was becoming dangerous. He was not just a visitor anymore. He was a piece on the board of Sarathi politics, and the princess stood at the center of it. Whatever happened next, their fates were beginning to entwine in ways neither of them had planned. The days that followed carried a new weight. The whispers against Princess Illyra grew louder in the palace. Nobles gathered in secret halls, their robes brushing together like dark wings, their voices low but sharp. They said she was losing her grip, that her curiosity about the human showed weakness, that she allowed old traditions to bend too far. To them, weakness in the air meant weakness in the empire itself. The court advisors, uneasy about the growing unrest, demanded that Illyra prove her loyalty. And so a ceremonial trial was announced. It was not a trial of crime, but a test of faith. A chance for the princess to demonstrate that her heart still belonged fully to Sarathi tradition. Before the trial, Rian was warned not to interfere. His presence would be allowed, but only as an observer. One step too far, and humanity's fragile chance at alliance could vanish forever. The trial took place in the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber lined with tall pillars of crystal that caught and carried every sound. The floor was polished black stone, and above, a dome of silver glass reflected the gathering like a second world hanging upside down. At the center stood Illyra, robed in white with a silver crest upon her brow. Around her, nobles filled the circle, their eyes sharp, their voices ready. The challenge was simple in appearance but heavy in meaning. She would be asked questions about duty, sacrifice, and loyalty. Each answer would show whether she remained true to Sarathi values or if she had allowed foreign influence to soften her resolve. Rian stood at the edge, his heart heavy as he watched. He knew the nobles wanted her to stumble. They wanted her to fail. The first questions came from the high speaker. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. Princess Illyra, if the safety of your empire demands it, will you cast aside all bonds, all attachments, even your own heart? Illyra's voice was calm. The empire is my duty. My heart belongs to it above all else. The nobles nodded slightly, though some seemed disappointed it was not harsher. Another question came, this time sharper. If a stranger steps within our walls and stirs doubt among your people, do you show patience or do you strike swiftly to protect the old ways? Her eyes flickered toward Rian for the briefest moment, but her voice remained steady. Patience is not weakness. To strike without thought is to act from fear, not strength. The Sarathi do not fear. We see, we judge, and only then do we act. Whispers spread like fire. Some nobles frowned deeply. Others exchanged knowing glances. The meaning was clear. She was defending her decision to allow the human emissary to remain. Rian clenched his hands at his sides. He knew her words were dangerous, but he also felt pride in her courage. Then came the final question, spoken by the oldest of the council. His voice cracked but carried great authority. If your people doubt your strength, will you show them proof through sacrifice? Will you cast away that which they call weakness? Silence filled the hall. The question was a trap. Everyone knew what it meant. To cast away weakness was to distance herself from the human, to reject openly what the nobles whispered about in the shadows. Illyra stood tall, her hands folded before her. For a long time she did not answer. Rian felt his chest tighten. He wanted to speak, to step forward, but he remembered the warning. This was not his place. Yet every moment of silence cut deeper, as if the whole empire held its breath waiting. At last Illyra raised her voice. I will not cast away what is not weak. Ness, curiosity is not weakness. To see beyond our own walls is not weakness. If my people doubt, then let them see my strength in walking paths they fear to walk. The Sarathi have survived for ages not by hiding from the unknown but by mastering it. The hall exploded with voices. Some shouted in anger, others in shock, and a few in reluctant admiration. The crystal pillars caught their words and sent them swirling through the chamber. Ryan's heart pounded. He could see the danger in her defiance, but he could also see the fire in her eyes. He could not hold back. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. The princess speaks true. Strength is not in silence and fear, but in courage. Humanity knows this well. We have faced storms, wars, and endless darkness. We stand not because we close our eyes, but because we keep them open even when it is hard. Gasps spread through the nobles. The guards moved at once, their weapons half raised, but Alira lifted a hand and they froze. Her eyes fixed on Ryan, a storm of warning and something softer hidden within. "You break the rules again, human," she said, her tone like steel. "You were told not to interfere." Ryan bowed his head. "Perhaps, but truth does not wait for permission." The hall shook with outrage. The nobles cried for punishment, some demanding his removal. Yet Alira remained still, her gaze locked on him. At last she spoke with finality. "The human has spoken out of turn, but let it be known. His words do not weaken me. They test me, and in standing firm I am not less Sarathi but more." Her declaration silenced the chamber. None could challenge her directly, though their eyes burned with anger. The trial was ended, but the battle for power had only begun. That night, as the palace grew quiet again, Ryan returned to his chamber with heavy thoughts. He had broken protocol, yet he felt no regret. For in Alira's eyes he had seen something shift. She had defended her people, yes, but also chosen her own path. And though she had warned him many times, he sensed that his presence was no longer just a burden. It was becoming part of her strength. The palace seemed calm on the outside, but inside it was filled with shadows of unrest. The ceremonial trial had ended, yet it had not silenced the nobles. If anything, it had made their whispers louder, their plans sharper. Princess Alira had stood firm, but her choice to defend her path only gave her enemies more reason to act. Ryan felt it in the air, a tension that clung to every hall he walked. Guards passed with heavier steps, advisors spoke in rushed tones, and servants lowered their eyes as though afraid of what might come. He knew the princess had taken a risk, and now she stood on unsteady ground. The day of the royal procession arrived soon after. It was meant to be a celebration, a show of strength before the people of the city. Alira would ride through the great avenues in a floating chariot of silver, surrounded by banners that stretched high into the sky. The nobles arranged it quickly, claiming it would restore the people's faith in her. But Ryan suspected the timing was no accident. Too much had happened too quickly. The city streets overflowed with citizens when the procession began. They filled balconies and rooftops, waving glowing ribbons of light. Music rose from tall horns, echoing through the wide streets. The floating chariot moved with smooth grace, carrying Alira at its center. She stood tall, her white robes shining in the twin sunlight, her crown reflecting sparks of silver. The people cheered, though beneath the sound Ryan felt a quiet unease. He walked close behind, part of the small group of chosen attendants. His eyes scanned the crowd. To most, the celebration looked perfect, but he had learned to watch for the smallest signs. And there it was, a sudden flicker of motion at the edge of a high balcony. His breath caught. The figure was too still, too focused. Without thinking, Ryan moved. A moment later, a bright bolt of energy cut through the air, aimed straight for the princess. Gasps filled the street as the light streaked toward her. Alira turned, her eyes wide, but before it could reach her, Ryan leapt forward. The bolt struck him across the side, sending him crashing onto the chariot floor. The crowd cried out in shock. Guards rushed to raise their shields, forming a barrier around the chariot. Arrows of light fired back toward the balcony where the attackers hid. Panic rippled through the people, their cheers turning into cries. Alira dropped to her knees beside Ryan. For the first time, her calm mask broke. Her hands hovered over him, trembling as she saw the burn along his side, the smoke rising faintly from his clothing. His face was pale, but his eyes still opened, still searched for hers. "You fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Ryan forced a weak smile. "Because humans protect those they call friend." Her hand reached instinctively, grasping his. The moment her fingers closed around his, a wave of gasps spread through the guards and nobles who saw. The sacred gesture forbidden to outsiders was now made in public. But Elira did not care. Her grip tightened as though her strength alone could hold him to life. "You should not have touched me," she said, her voice shaking. "And yet now I will not let go." The guards secured the area quickly. The attackers were revealed to be part of the noble faction that had opposed her, their robes torn away to show hidden weapons. They were captured, their plot exposed before all. The people who had once doubted now saw the truth with their own eyes. Enemies of the Empire had moved against their princess. But for Elira, none of it mattered in that moment. She looked only at Ryan, his breathing heavy, his eyes fading yet still filled with quiet resolve. He had given himself to protect her without hesitation, without thought of reward. It was an act no Sarathi noble would have risked. To them, survival and order were greater than sacrifice. Yet this human had stepped into the path of death as if it was the only choice. When the chariot finally reached the palace again, healers rushed to take Rian into their care. Elira followed, her face pale but her steps firm. She ignored the protests of advisors, ignored the shock of the nobles who had witnessed the forbidden touch. Let them whisper, let them plot. She had seen something that none of them could deny. Rian had broken their rules, yes. He had reached for her when he should have stood still. But in doing so, he had shown a strength that no tradition could erase. That night, as the city quieted, the story spread like fire. The human emissary had taken a strike for the princess. The human's hand had been held by her own. For the first time, the people began to see not just scandal but courage. For the first time, the Sarathi Empire looked at humanity not as reckless children, but as something more. And in the silence of her chamber, Princess Elira sat alone, her hands still remembering the warmth of his. She had once warned him never to touch her again. Now she found herself holding on to that touch as though it was the only light in the shadows closing in around her. The palace was wrapped in silence after the attack. The nobles who had plotted were dragged away in chains, but their schemes had already left deep cracks within the empire. Many nobles still remained uncertain, their loyalty balanced on fear and ambition. The people, however, had seen what happened with their own eyes. They whispered of the human who had shielded their princess, and their whispers grew into respect. Ryan lay in a recovery chamber, his body resting inside a soft cocoon of healing light. The Sarathi healers worked with great skill, but they admitted that human biology was strange to them. Their medicines were meant for their own kind, not for one who carried a heart and blood so different. Even so, he survived, his body slowly repairing itself through willpower as much as medicine. Princess Elira came to see him often. She would stand beside his bed, her silver eyes fixed on his face, remembering the way he had leapt forward without hesitation. She had once warned him not to touch her again, yet now she felt as if his touch had changed something inside her. The Empire Council met in secret chambers. Some nobles called for Rian to be sent away, claiming that his presence only brought danger. Others argued that his courage had inspired the people, and to exile him now would cause unrest. Elira listened in silence, but in her heart her decision was already made. She would not allow him to be discarded. When Rian finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Elira leaning forward, her face softened by exhaustion. She had not left his side. He tried to sit up, but the pain made him gasp. "You should not move," she said quietly. "Your body still heals." He gave a faint smile. "Then I will move slowly." "Has the city calmed?" She nodded, though her eyes were troubled. "The people are calmer, yes. But the council is divided. Some believe you saved me because of fate. Others say it was reckless chance. I must hold the Empire steady while shadows still circle." Ryan's voice was weak but steady. "Then let me help you. On Earth, when leaders face danger, they do not stand alone. They rely on allies, even if those allies are different." Her gaze lingered on him. "Your kind speaks so boldly of trust. Yet here trust is rare. Do you not fear I will cast you aside?" He shook his head. "You already held my hand when the world was watching. That choice cannot be undone. Whatever happens now, we share the same path." Elira's eyes softened, though she quickly turned away, hiding her thoughts behind royal calm. She left the chamber soon after, but the words stayed with her. Days passed, and slowly Ryan regained strength. He could walk again, though his steps were unsteady. The nobles were shocked when Elira allowed him to join her in council meetings. They whispered behind folded hands, but she ignored them. She wanted the council to hear a human voice, even if they resisted. During one meeting, maps of the outer borders were laid across the great table. Scouts had reported that unrest spread beyond the capital. Some noble houses were secretly gathering fleets, waiting for the right moment to challenge the crown. Illyra studied the maps with a sharp gaze, but Ryan noticed something the others ignored. The rebel fleets were positioned not for defense but for isolation. They were preparing to cut off the capital, to starve the heart of the empire. They want to surround you, Ryan explained, pointing at the star routes. On Earth, armies sometimes win not by battle but by cutting supply. They trap their enemy until surrender becomes the only choice. The nobles scoffed at first. A human speaks of war as if he knows our stars, one of them sneered. But Illyra silenced him with a single look. Explain further, she said. Ryan leaned on the table, tracing paths with his finger. If you strike here at their narrowest point, you can break the circle before it closes. You do not need to fight them all. You only need to open one path and their plan fails. The room grew quiet. Slowly, the nobles realized the truth of his words. Illyra straightened, her voice steady. Then that is the course we shall take. For the first time, she had chosen to follow human strategy. And for the first time, the nobles were forced to see that this outsider might hold value. That night, Illyra walked alone through the palace gardens. The air was filled with the glow of crystal flowers, their light soft against the dark sky. She thought of Ryan's words, of his strange courage and simple logic. He had no blood tied to her, no oath, no claim of power, yet he gave himself without question. In her heart, she knew she had crossed a line when she took his hand before the crowd. But she also knew she would cross it again if it meant holding on to that rare strength. As she stood beneath the glowing trees, she whispered into the quiet air. Once I warned you never to touch me again. Yet now it is I who cannot let go. Far across the garden, unseen by her, Ryan leaned weakly against a pillar, walking slowly back to his chambers. He had heard her words carried on the wind. A faint smile touched his lips, though he said nothing. His strength was not fully returned, but his resolve was stronger than ever. The shadows of rebellion grew, but so did a bond that neither law nor tradition could erase. The skies above the capital burned with the glow of ships. The rebellion had finally moved. Fleets of silver and black vessels poured from the outer systems, their engines cutting across the stars like scars of fire. The nobles who had conspired for so long now revealed their strength openly. Their goal was clear: take the capital, seize the throne, and remove the princess who had dared to stand apart from their traditions. Within the palace, the alarms rang. Commanders rushed through the halls, their armor shining under the red light. The great council gathered in fear, but Princess Illyra stood steady at the center of it all. Her robes shimmered faintly, her crown gleamed, and her voice carried through the chamber like steel. They believe the empire weak, she said. They believe our bonds are broken. They are wrong. Tonight we show them the empire still stands. At her side, Ryan walked carefully, still carrying the wound that had never fully healed. His steps were slower, but his spirit burned with quiet fire. The guards glanced at him with uncertainty, but none dared question why he was there. They had seen what he had done before. Together, Illyra and Ryan entered the command hall where star maps lit the wide walls. The rebel fleets were closing fast, spreading into the shape of a ring around the planet. Exactly as Ryan had warned, they meant to surround the capital. They want to trap us, Ryan said, his voice calm despite the chaos. But if we break one part of the circle, they lose their grip. Illyra turned to her generals. You heard him. Prepare the fleet. We strike not at the strongest point, but at the weakest. The generals bowed, though their eyes lingered on Ryan with mixed respect and doubt. But there was no time for hesitation. Orders were given, and soon the skies filled with the roar of Sarathi warships launching into the stars. The battle began above the world, where silver shields clashed with beams of light. Explosions lit the void, scattering debris that fell like shooting stars. The rebels fought with fury, but the royal fleet pushed hard against their weakest flank, forcing a gap open. Ryan watched from the command hall, his eyes fixed on the shifting lines of battle. Hold the center, he urged. If they panic, they'll try to close the gap too quickly. That's when we strike again. Illyra repeated his words to the commanders, and the fleet moved as one. Just as he predicted, the rebels shifted their forces in haste, leaving themselves exposed. The royal ships surged through the opening, breaking the circle apart. But victory did not come easily. The rebels, desperate and furious, sent a final wave directly toward the palace itself. Smaller strike ships pierced through the defenses, diving into the capital's skies. Sirens wailed as beams of fire tore through towers. Illyra did not hesitate. She called for her guard and strode toward the landing fields where the strike ships descended. Ryan followed her despite the pain in his side. "You should stay behind," she said as they walked. He shook his head. "On Earth, leaders do not hide while others fight. And I will not leave you to face this alone." The landing field shook as enemy ships crashed down, their doors bursting open with soldiers in black armor. The guards of the princess rushed forward to meet them, blades of light clashing in sparks. Illyra drew her own weapon, a long staff of silver energy. She moved with the grace of her people, striking swiftly, her robes flowing like wings. Ryan took up a discarded Sarathi blade, its weight heavy but familiar enough to wield. He fought not with elegance but with determination, each swing driven by simple will. Side by side they stood. The soldiers pressed hard, but the sight of their princess on the field filled the royal guards with unshakable courage. And when they saw the human fighting at her side, refusing to fall, something shifted deep within them. They no longer fought just for tradition. They fought for something greater. The last of the rebels were driven back, their ships forced into retreat. The skies slowly cleared as the royal fleet pushed them beyond the system. The capital stood scarred but unbroken. In the quiet after the battle, Illyra and Ryan stood together on the landing field. The ground was marked with fire, the air heavy with smoke, but the people had gathered. Citizens, guards, and even doubtful nobles came forward, their voices rising in cheers. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Their princess had not hidden behind walls. She had stood among them, and at her side was the human who had risked his life again and again, not for power but for loyalty. Illyra raised her staff high, her voice carrying across the field. "Today we did not fight as nobles and servants. We did not fight as Sarathi and human. We fought as one people, standing against those who would tear us apart. This is the future of our empire." The crowd roared, their cheers shaking the air. For the first time in generations, the Sarathi people believed in something greater than tradition. They believed in unity. When the cheers finally faded, Illyra turned to Ryan. She studied him quietly, her silver eyes soft. "Do you remember the first thing I told you?" He smiled faintly, though his body ached with exhaustion. "You told me never to touch you again. And yet," she said, stepping closer, "it is your hand I held when the world watched. And it is your strength that saved us all." Her hand lifted, brushing his gently in front of the people. No one gasped this time. No one whispered in shock. Instead, they cheered louder, their voices rising like the very stars above them. The rebellion was crushed. The throne was secured, and a new bond had been forged, between princess and human, between two worlds that had once stood apart. The warning she had once spoken was gone, replaced with something stronger. Not fear, not distance, but trust. And in that moment, both knew their story had only just begun.